Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host Austin Davidson.
Hello.
It is Season 5, Episode 24. We're talking Steelers and Browns this week. Let's get hyped because for the first time since the 2003 wildcard round, Steelers v. Browns, the last time the Steelers and Browns came into a game against each other with a winning record. Big shout out to Austin for finding that stat. And man, what do you remember about January of 2003?
Absolutely nothing. I was not even close to a football fan yet. Way too far go for me. I was 6 years old.
That was one of my earliest football memories, that game. They say that was the first time that Heinz Field really felt like the old Three River Stadium. So, Steelers and Browns, there's a lot of reasons why this game is not going to be like the games of old, most likely. Certainly not the hype leading up to it. Let's just talk about the facts. Since the Browns came back into the league in 1999, the Steelers have owned the Browns. Would you believe it? At one point, the Browns held the higher win percentage, like they were leading the series at one point, the new Browns.
Sorry, say that one more time?
The new Browns were leading this series between these two teams at one point.
Really? That's wild.
They won 2 of the first 3 games.
And that was it?
Yep, from that point on, the Steelers have been in control. So I can actually think of all of the wins that the Browns have had. They won the second and third games that these two teams played. So they were 2-0, or 2-1. And then the Browns did not win another game against Pittsburgh, so this would have been the 2000 season. They won a game. So 1999 and 2000, they each won a game, so that's 2. They won in 2003. That's the only win the Browns have at Heinz Field, so they're 1-19 total in Heinz Field. That's the only one, 2003. So that's 3. They won 1 game in 2009. That's 4. They won a game in 2012, 2014, and last year. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 7 total wins since 1999 the Browns have against the Steelers. How about that?
That's wild, man.
And,
really, really bad.
And there's caveats to a lot of them. So let's work backwards. The whole Myles Garrett game last year, that was a game that Mason Rudolph started when he was in his worst stretch of his football career thus far. He was coming out. It was a Thursday night game, so another caveat in Cleveland. 2014, there's no caveat there. That was just a great Browns win right there. 2012, so of the 7 wins, there's 1 with a bit of a caveat. Number 2 is the 2012 game against Cleveland. The Steelers had 8 turnovers. Charlie Batch threw 3 interceptions. Every running back on the roster fumbled. So there's 8 turnovers, and the Browns won by just 6 points. So there's that. There's a couple caveats there. Another Thursday night game in Cleveland in 2009. I'll give him that one because that Steelers team still should have won that game. The 2003 team that the Steelers lost to the Browns, that was a 6-win Steelers team. Their only losing record in this this century thus far. And then another loss at the hands of the Browns would have been in the 1999 season, which was also tied for the worst record the Steelers have had since 1988. So there you go. About half the Browns' wins have some sort of caveat to them.
Yeah, that's wild, man. They're not even good. Jesus.
So, with that in mind, obviously, the big talk about the Browns and Steelers right now has little to do with the game itself and more to do with the fact that Myles Garrett is playing Pittsburgh for the first time. Let's just get it out of the way. What are you expecting between these two teams right now? Are you expecting dirty play like we saw from the Bengals when Vontaze Burfict first committed his dirty plays against the Steelers in 2015, and then it was always really dangerous and chippy after? Or do you think it's just going to be a little chippy where it's like some action after the play, or do you think it's just going to be a clean game? What are you thinking?
pretty sure it's just going to be a stereotypical divisional game where it's like a little bit chippy, but not because of the past drama. It's like, I think it'd be different if Mason Rudolph is out there, but he's not. It's kind of like the players that had beef really aren't out there. I mean, Marquise Pouncey will be, and he's a guy that had a lot to say after that, but I don't feel like this game is going to be any extra chippy than it normally would be for a divisional matchup.
I agree with you. I think both teams know the importance of this game, and I think that while things might get a little heated, I don't think it's going to be anything outrageous. I do think that, there's a little too much on the line, and both teams are looking to make sure that they're focused on playing the game the right way, and that includes Garrett himself too.
Yeah, I agree.
So, coming into this game, let's talk a little bit about the Browns real quick. Their big story has been offense so far. They have one of the best ground games in the league. They've got a couple great running backs. Obviously, Kareem Hunt's going to be starting with Nick Chubb out, but they're running the ball really well. The best rushing attack in the league. Statistics-wise, they're scoring 31 points a game. Their passing game has taken a back seat, but they haven't necessarily needed to throw it all, not to this point anyways. And then defensively, they're not giving up a lot on the ground, and they are getting gashed, giving up some points, but they are first in the NFL in turnovers forced. So a mixed bag from the Browns, but ultimately they're 4-1. They're doing something right.
And what's really funny is I think like their offense and defense kind of mirror each other. Their offense is really good at the run, but their passing isn't really good statistically. It's the same thing on defense. They're only allowing 87 rush yards per game, which is fourth, but their passing yards per game given up is 296.4, which is 30th. And then you look at their offense, and they have 188.4 rushing yards per game, which is first, and their passing yards per game is at 198.2, which is 29. Literally, their offense and defense literally like mirror each other.
And then as far as the Steelers go, their offense has kicked it into gear lately. They obviously surpassed 30 points for the first time in 23 games last week. They're doing a good job with the ground game, believe it or not, even though it might not feel like it sometimes. They're not getting a lot of pressure against Ben. He's getting rid of the ball faster than any quarterback in the league. And despite the offensive, not necessarily struggles, but they've seemed kind of quiet early on, they're 10th in the league in points per game, so they are still scoring points here. And defensively, even with all the issues we talked about earlier in the week after the Eagles game, this is still statistically a top 10 unit. I mean, they're still doing a good job. They're still getting their turnovers, not at the rate that they did last year, but they're getting sacks crazy. So there's a lot to like about both teams. And when you look at the stats, I think it's quite simple why both teams have a combined 8-1 record so far.
Yeah, man, easily. A lot of what Cleveland's doing, Cleveland's number one in turnovers in the league right now, so it helps boost their offensive numbers a lot when their defense is helping them so much. I think they had 2 last week against the Colts. I know one went for a pick 6, and then when Ronnie Harrison got hurt, Sheldrick Redwine came in and he got a pick himself. So they're really good at getting turnovers.
Yeah, so individually speaking, we'll talk a bit about some of these guys, but initial thoughts on a guy on the Browns and a guy on the Steelers. You look at these individual statistics, a guy that stands out to you?
When you look at the individual statistics, when I look at the Browns, I look at Myles Garrett as being the scariest because it kind of makes sense. I mean, he's their best guy. He has 6.5 sacks on the year, 10 quarterback hits. He's leading the league in forced fumbles right now with 3. So he's playing similar to how T.J. Watt was last year. He's a guy that I'm looking for. And for the Steelers, with Deontay Johnson now ruled out, I might be looking at Chase Claypool again or Juju Smith-Schuster, one of those 2 wide receivers. Depends on who they decide to cover. Are they going to be more aware of Chase Claypool than the Eagles were and not put linebackers on them? Probably. But it might open up Juju or maybe even James Washington. James Washington can be thrown in there too.
You talked about Deontay Johnson. Let's move to the injury report. So for the Steelers, they only have 2 players out right now. That's Deontay Johnson, as you mentioned, with the back injury, and David DeCastro with an abdomen injury. They're both out. Marquise Pouncey, Marcus Allen, and Derek Watt, who were limited or didn't practice in some sort of fashion this week, do not have injury designation, so they will play. The Browns is a little more extensive. They'll be missing the highest graded guard in the NFL in Wyatt Teller. They'll also be missing safeties Ronnie Harrison and Carl Joseph, as well as reserve linebacker Jacob Phillip. The rest of their injury report, Baker Mayfield is on there with a rib injury. Odell Beckham Jr. has been out with an illness. Still not sure about him. Mayfield is trending in the right direction to play. Still waiting to hear on Beckham Jr. Jamie, is it Jillian or Gillian? Do you know?
I think it's Gillen.
Gillen, he has a groin injury, so we'll see what's going on with him. Jarvis Landry was limited on Friday, so we'll keep an eye on him. So both of the top receivers have got stuff going on. And then for the Browns' defensive front, Olivier Vernon and Larry Ogunjobi are questionable as well. So they were limited all week. So as we have lately for the Steelers and Browns game, we brought back our old buddy John Gehring of 89.1 The Point to talk about the Steelers and Browns this week. So we have our interview pre-taped, so we're going to include that in here. And then on the other side of that, we'll talk a little bit more about our thoughts about the Steelers and Browns, and then we'll get into our picks. So why don't we get right to that, unless if you have anything else to add, Austin?
But if you guys want to hear just the interview, that will be going up on our SoundCloud and YouTube as well, if you would just want to hear the interview.
Yeah, so we'll have it included in this and just that separately. So wanted to be fair to him as well. So certainly feel free to let us know if you enjoyed it, and we hope you do. So all right, we'll be back after the interview. Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast, everybody. John Keir and Austin Davidson. We are being joined today by our good friend of the show and former frequent guest, John Gehring from 89.1 The Point. John, how you doing, buddy? Great to have you back.
It's great to be back, John. I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having me on. I always know that when I come on Stronger Than Steel, it means it's time for a really exciting divisional battle between our teams.
Sure is, and this might be the most hotly anticipated game between these two teams in quite a long time. A combined record of 8-1 between the two teams. The Browns' only loss coming in the season opener, so these two teams are riding a combined 8 straight wins coming into this game at Heinz Field. And despite the different sort of atmosphere that's going to be at Heinz Field because of the coronavirus protocols, I think there's only like 5,500 people allowed in the stadium. Last week there were just over 4,700, so it's not going to be quite the same as 65,000, 70,000 people, but I'm sure everyone in attendance is going to be psyched for this game. So obviously Austin and I have been looking a lot at the Steelers this year. There have been some things to like, some things that we want to see better with the team, but ultimately 4-0 is 4-0. I know the Browns started kind of rocky this year, but through 5 games, it looks like there's a huge difference with the way this team is not just playing, but the way they're sort of conducting themselves. And it all starts, it seems to me, at the top with new head coach Kevin Stefanski. In your mind, what has he brought to the table for this team that has been so different from different coaches in the past?
Well, he's brought stability, structure, order, silent leadership by example, and that's something that this team has desperately lacked for, as you said, a very long time. And I'm just, obviously, after that first game, that big loss to the Ravens, a blowout loss, a lot of Browns fans thought, oh boy, here we go again. But Stefanski didn't overreact. He didn't brush it off either, but he didn't overreact. And all of a sudden, here we are, little by little, taking it 1 week at a time. That cliche really applying to him and his coaching staff, and that's one thing he did a great job of was building a great coaching staff around him that has individually improved everybody, from the biggest improvement on the offensive line to even improvements defensively in areas where the Browns haven't been competent in like decades. So I'm really excited about his leadership and just the fact that he's brought a bunch of stability to this organization that we've desperately needed.
Well, with that great answer, I wanted to go talk about more of like in-game stuff with more of your players. And would you like to start on defense or offense for your team?
Well, defense wins championships. Let's start there.
All right. So The Browns' safety depth has been put to test since the beginning of camp. I think you could agree with that. With the expected starter Grant Talbot being lost to injury before the season could begin, Carl Joseph being sidelined with a hamstring injury he suffered earlier in the year, and now Ronnie Harrison sidelined for this game with a concussion, forcing Andrew Sindeo and Sheldrick Redwine into starting roles for this game. So, luckily for you, the Steelers' deep passing game hasn't connected at all this year. But knowing that fact, how do you feel about your safeties coming in, and how about the rest of your secondary? Speak a little on them.
Well, not good, to put it briefly. I think the secondary was a weaker part of the team coming into the season. I love the Delpit pick, though. I thought he actually fell a little further than expected into that second round of the draft. But I really, I'm concerned with some of these no-name defensive backs from I don't even know where. They just seem to have come from nowhere off the practice squad, and all of a sudden, here you go, start against an explosive offense like the Steelers. I mean, you say they haven't really connected on their deep passing game, but then again, how many weapons does this offense have? And it seems like they turn everybody into a weapon, even if they aren't considered a weapon coming in, like, Mr. Claypool there last week with his 4 touchdowns out of nowhere, and my fantasy opponent happened to start him last week for whatever reason. I don't know why. But that's the concern for this Browns secondary, a poor time to be depleted back there at an already weak point of the team there. Although I do think Redwine has made some improvements over the past few weeks when he's seen some playing time, but not enough for me to feel confident against this explosive offense.
I think that's fair. The one thing I wanted to touch on is Grant Delpit. Grant Delpit was one of my prospects going into last year. He was such an interesting choice. He had one of the best coverage of any safety I looked at. His tackling was just so worrisome. I think that when he comes back, it should be interesting to see how he plays. But obviously, the Browns wanted to put him in a starting role immediately, so he must have been doing better than I would have thought in his first year, because I was worried about his tackling. As for everything else you said, how do you feel about Tavares Mitchell? That's a guy that I've always kind of liked. How is he playing?
I mean, Mitchell, I thought was best in a special teams kind of role, but then again, Stefanski's whole philosophy, like a lot of coaches now, is that that's where you start and you kind of build your way into a starting role in the offensive or defensive side, especially for a player like that. But he has improved. He has played fairly well, and once again, I think they're pretty shallow back there, and I like you said, I really liked Delpit in coverage, and I personally, like the Browns, wanted to rush him into a starting role too, because that's one area where this team has struggled so much. And the tackling, that's a little bit worrisome. I think the problem with the Browns' missed tackles, though, so often has been the fact that they've given up big gashes in the passing game, and they're kind of chasing people, and obviously that leads to poor tackling. So I think it starts with strong coverage, and then the rest kind of takes care of itself.
Very fair. Something with the Browns that they like to rotate in their players a lot. Like the Steelers do the same. The Steelers rotate their linebackers. Like T.J. Watt isn't out there all the time. Alex Highsmith has actually been getting some playing time. Ola Daney as well. And with that being said, because you were talking about the rotating and earning snaps on defense and stuff like with Tavares Mitchell, Matt Wilson got injured earlier on in the year in training camp. To hold him out of 2 games, he wasn't able to get a full starting role back even after those 2 games yet, because they were worried about him getting re-injured. He only played 27 of the 82 possible snaps against the Cowboys, but now he's back, getting full snaps again, as far as I know. How has the middle linebacker play been?
I really am a fan of Mack Wilson myself. Of course, an Alabama product, I'm always going to be a fan of somebody coming out of a program like that. But the linebacker play in general, has been one of the stronger points of the team. Obviously, you can nitpick with all sorts of missed tackles and stuff, but they've actually helped out a lot in the pass rush. And I really like the defensive philosophy that this coaching staff has brought that's maximized the ability of these linebackers. And I was a little bit worried about that position coming in, actually, and just the inexperience. at the linebacker position. But as you said, Wilson back, that's going to be a really good sign, and especially against a Steelers team with such an explosive passing game, but also, you guys like to throw those little screens out of the backfield, and your quarterback likes to move around, and those are all things that you need strong linebacker play to counter. So I'm really looking for a big week from them.
So one thing that's going for you is that the screenplay for the Steelers has not been working whatsoever. It's such a simple play, and the Steelers this year just haven't been able to get it running. Going forward, probably the best part of your defense is your defensive line. Ogunjobi playing at a career year level. Myles Garrett leading the league in 6.5 sacks. How do you feel they're going to fare against the Steelers' offensive line, which is pretty solid? They're definitely not the same offensive line that the Browns have seen for the past 3 years. They're now changed up. David DeCastro will not be playing in this game, and but they're still kind of not giving up the sacks still. They've only allowed 6 sacks in the year, which is tied for 4th. So how do you feel about your defensive line going into this game?
I feel good entering this game with the Steelers' offensive line, as you said, a little bit understaffed there. Garrett should be interesting, obviously, just because of the circumstances with him now returning and this being his first action against the Steelers, following obviously a horrible thing that happened last year. So that obviously raises some intrigue. But I'm really glad that the first guy you brought up, even before Garrett, was Larry Ogunjobi. He has been the rock of this defensive line. I mean, obviously Garrett's the flash and the most talented and just the strongest brute force pass rusher on the edge that there is. But Ogunjobi there in the middle has worked wonders stopping the run and just, as you said, having a career year. And he had a great year last year too. So I look for him surprisingly getting into the pass rush mix. He's more known as that big run stopper there in the middle, but he can rush the passer too and kind of wreak some havoc from the middle. And of course, Garrett oftentimes benefits from his ability to push the middle there by getting a sack there from the edge. But I'm really excited about the way this defensive line is trending, and I think they're probably the strongest position group on this team right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly starts up front. Any weaknesses that this team might have on defense is certainly buoyed a lot by what's happening on the defensive front. And I think that Garrett right now is playing like one of the front runners for the Defensive MVP, Defensive Player of the Year award. But I'm glad we had a bit of a conversation here about Ogunjobi. To your point, John, among interior defensive linemen, he is the 3rd best run defense grade of interior defensive linemen that have played a minimum of, I forget the number of snaps. I think it's among guys that have played at least 59 snaps. The only interior guys with higher grades against the run are Jonathan Hankins for the Raiders and Tyson Alualu for the Pittsburgh Steelers, oddly enough. So we got a lot of solid play up the middle with interior guys here, and Ogunjobi's no small part of that. So now, Garrett, as far as the way he's been playing this year, do you know by any chance if he's been lining up mostly on one side, or do you know if the Browns like to move him around?
Well, they like to put him on the weak side, but obviously that depends on matchups. So from what I've seen so far, he's been matching up mostly. Against Prescott, he was rushing him from that top side of the line, but it really just depends on those matchups. I'm not sure where they'll end up putting him this week, but Stefanski likes to rotate, as we've discussed, and I think a lot of Garrett's success, just to touch on your point there about him being in the running for defensive MVP. I don't take anything away from Myles Garrett and how talented of a pass rusher he is, but you watch a lot of his sacks this season, and so many of them have come from those other interior linemen making plays, most notably Ogunjobi, just collapsing the middle and allowing for him to get to the quarterback from the edge. So I give a ton of credit to this whole line. Obviously, Garrett will get most of the accolades, but I give a ton of credit to this whole defensive line and the coaching for putting him in such a position to have this MVP-like season.
Yeah, it's definitely a group effort. Another guy that gets lost in the shuffle a bit, a guy that's been previously well known for his defensive play, is Sheldon Richardson. I feel like he flies under the radar a bit. He hasn't fallen off. He's still out there, and he's actually second on the team in hurries, according to PFF. But I know that it has been a team effort, but Garrett's returning has certainly been huge because there's only one player within even half of his total as far as quarterback hurries, according to PFF. So he's certainly been a huge part of that defense. And I just wanted to touch on a couple other things regarding the defense, is that I'm kind of surprised at how well the linebackers have been playing as a unit because of the fact that they lost Joe Schobert. I mean, I'd have thought that losing him, I know that there was such a lack of experience that was coming into the team, but former Super Bowl MVP Malcolm Smith has actually been really solid too. He's among those guys. He's one of those guys that kind of was a flash in the pan guy, but so far he's played well too.
And to also touch on that, the Browns have really been rotating all their linebackers. They've been using them all. Like Taki's been getting some playing time as well, and he's done pretty well in his limited time. So just to mirror John's point, it's just that their linebackers were very impressive. I really thought it was going to be a weakness coming into this year for you guys, and especially without oh
Delpit
my gosh, how can I remember his name? I just said it. The middle linebacker that's next to Goodson.
Schobert.
Yeah, with Mac Wilson starting now. Mac Wilson was the guy I was looking for because I'm an idiot. But without Mac Wilson for 2 games, I really thought you were going to struggle on the inside. But because of your defensive line playing in front of them, it's allowed you guys to still be one of the best rushing defenses, ranking 4th in the league in rushing yards given up per game at only 87 per game. So overall, good job for your front 7 unit.
Overall thoughts about your defense, just real quick. They've been solid. They have some holes. I mean, what defense doesn't have holes these days? But how much better do you think they can be? John?
Uh-oh.
Oh, I heard you there. You there, bud? Looks like we're having some technical difficulties here. We'll put a pause on things momentarily here. All right, we have John back on the line here. So, John, I was just going to ask you really quickly, overall about the defense. I know that playing defense in the league this year has been especially tough because there's been such a lack of holding penalties called on offensive linemen, and DPI calls are feeling like they're being called as high as they ever have been. The name of the game is forcing turnovers and getting sacks. I know that there have been weaknesses on the back end for this defense, but how good are they playing in your mind right now, and where is the ceiling for them?
Well, the ceiling is a lot higher than where they've gone. From what I've seen, I mean, they've gotten away with a lot, especially in that secondary, and injuries play a big role back there right now. But even without, I'm not convinced of the experience of that secondary, just with so many young players. Don't get me wrong, I love Ward and Delpit, and even Redwine's been playing better as of late, but just the inexperience and the poor tackling has caught up to them. And that's why they've been giving up some big gashing passing plays. As for the front line, though, I mean, the defensive line, and as you guys noted, the linebackers have overachieved this season. I give them a lot of credit for hanging in there. As a unit, they've collectively played much better than in past seasons, although we did have a couple of good years there, even when the whole team as a whole was awful. The defense was strong, but the past couple of seasons, it's taken some steps backward. This season so far, a big step forward, but there is room to grow for sure, especially with a healthy secondary, because right now they're relying so much on getting to the quarterback and forcing him to throw before he wants to, and that has been an issue when the pass rush has worn down, like in that Cowboys game when they sacked Prescott like 4 or 5 times in that first half, and then after that they couldn't get to him, and all of a sudden the Cowboys made a heck of a rally. So it really kind of starts and ends there, and with a healthy and just better secondary in general, there wouldn't be so much pressure on that defensive line to force those earlier throws. So especially in the defending the pass, I think there's a lot of room to grow, but a strong start so far.
Well, if that's all you have to say for the defense, I think we're good to move on to the offense, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So the big thing I want to talk about the offense is your rushing game. And I think a big part of your rushing game has been Wyatt Teller. He's one of the best graded guards ever by PFF through 5 weeks, with an emphasis on how well he is run blocking. So he is out for this game, which, in my opinion, is a big loss. First, who do you think is going to be starting in his place? And do you see the run game being as effective without him while going against one of the best-ranked rushing defense? Steelers are currently ranked second in rush yards given up per game, only behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And a big part of that why they're not first, is because they gave a 174-yard run to Miles Sanders last week.
That's right. Yes, and that's the critical matchup coming in, right? But as you said, that Teller loss. Wow, I guess it's supposed to be Chris Hubbard coming in his place and sliding on over there, which should be interesting. And you guys know all about Chris Hubbard, but I think without Teller, that makes a huge difference. That the guard play for the Browns has been off the charts, and I think that's why obviously the rushing attack has been so strong. And it's funny, it's not funny, but it's pretty terrible actually, how you've listened to the Fox commentators in the Browns Cowboys game. Chubb goes down with an injury in the first quarter, and then all of a sudden Kareem Hunt and just third and fourth Deontay Johnson, all these guys that nobody's ever heard of, comes off the bench and still averages 7-8 yards a carry. And the commentators are like, whoa, this is amazing. The Browns have such a deep running back. You know, they're praising these running backs, and it's like, well, good for them, but hold on. Do you not see right now that this offensive line is just dominating in the trenches, and a lot of that has to do with Wyatt Teller. So without him, going to be some tougher sledding this week, and what a poor time to not have him. I mean, this is a rough week in a lot of ways, and to not have, we talked about the defensive injuries, and then to not have Teller is going to really hurt against, like you said, a very deep defense, and one who's great at stopping the run. Should be maybe top in the league.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a confession. I used to play offensive line when I was growing up in high school, and I love good offensive line play. We've been very spoiled in Pittsburgh to have a lot of good offensive line play over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I, quite frankly, love the way the Browns handled their offensive line this year. I mean, John, last year, I know they had injuries and whatnot, but last year it was a train wreck, was it not last year?
Yeah, last year was rough on the line, and that's why it was like the top priority for Stefanski and his staff coming in. Like, okay, free agency, tackle. That's what we need. Draft, okay, sure, sort of solidify that offensive line, and that's exactly what they did, and I give them a lot of credit for doing that. And we've seen the production as a result, and it's a combination of experience and youth, and that's something that I really like. Obviously, there's room for improvement. There's always room for improvement, especially in pass protection, but even that has been so much better and given Mayfield so much more time to pass, and I really am excited for the line moving forward, because I don't see it regressing, and I think it's going to allow that these running backs that we have to make some big steps forward in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe since Stefanski came in, you have the only same starter from last year is just Joel Bitonio, right? Since you have Conklin at left tackle, now you had Wyatt Teller at left guard, and you had J.C. Treader. J.C. Treader started last year, didn't he? Yeah.
He didn't. I don't believe he started the season. He ended up coming in at center, yeah. And so that's an overlap. But then again, I don't know if it's just the fact that, I've never really thought about this. Is it just the fact that we've brought in new offensive linemen to take pressure off of one another, or is it the new coaching? And our offensive line coach is great, and just that whole new culture and system that has allowed Treader and Bitonio to play just exponentially better. I mean, the amount of holding penalties they would each, I guess Treader had a pretty strong season last year overall. Bitonio, okay. But I think they've played so much better, and as a unit, collaboratively, they've just made massive improvements. And again, I just do not know, to be honest with you, if that's the coaching staff or just the idea that, you bring in a new left tackle with a ton of experience in Conklin and things get easier.
Well, if I may, I actually think that it's probably a good bit of both. Because, I mean, let's be honest, the offensive plan last year, Freddie Kitchens, say what you want about him, but he had never been the head coach of a team before. Kevin Stefanski has a lot more experience in that regard. And I think that, I love the way the Browns handled this past offseason. They had a bad year on offense last year. They had the weapons at receiver, but Baker Mayfield struggled. The offensive line struggled. So they basically did a lot that they could to make life easier for him so that he wasn't under siege a lot. So what they did was, they already had the running backs. They had the receivers. They shored up their offensive line. They drafted a tackle with a first-round pick. They got Jack Conklin, who's one of the best run-blocking linemen in the league. And they made a lot of changes to their scheme that involved a lot of play action and things of that nature. And they also got Austin Hooper, who I always thought was a nice under-the-radar addition. And I really like what they've done with the personnel. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that labor on the field, especially with the offensive line. So, I mean, they struggled last year, but you look at all their highest-graded offensive players. 4 of their first 5 highest-graded players, according to PFF, are offensive linemen. You got Teller, who, by the way, I don't know if it's maintaining this week, but through 4 weeks, he was the highest graded guard in PFF history. So, I mean, he was off the charts. And Jack Conklin has traditionally been one of the best run-blocking tackles in the league. Bitonio and Treader were playing well. The worst overall graded player is Jedrick Wills, the rookie tackle who had played right tackle in college. So, I mean, can you really fault him for not being perfect in year one with no training, no preseason, limited training camp, and switching positions? I mean, he's been fantastic, all things considered, I think.
Yeah. Again, I'm a really big fan of these Alabama linemen, and that was exactly the pick I wanted them to make. Certainly worth that early first round pick, in my opinion, for Wills. But I have to say you're exactly right, and the combination of both that you speak of also goes to show just the mix of experience and youth is really what's allowing this line to click, and it's really interesting. I didn't know that about Teller being the highest rated in history. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so at least through 5 weeks, I wasn't sure exactly the parameters of it, but all you really need to know is he's playing really good. So that was basically the point. So let's talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield, because his rookie year was awesome. I mean, he came off the bench. It was a new energized Browns team, and then last year was the complete opposite. He was not good. The walls were closing in around him. This year has been kind of a mixed bag. I mean, he's done some things well. He has had a couple games where he's reverted to his habits from last year. I think you should throw that Ravens game from the season opener out the window, because that was kind of predictable. So, I mean, your evaluation of Baker to this point this year, where is he at in your mind? Because it seems like he's somewhere between last year and 2 years ago.
Yeah, I'd say if we were to make this academic, like B+. I give him credit for a bounce back season, but I try not to give him too much credit because he's had more time to throw this year. He has, though, made sounder decisions, and that's a product of having more time to throw and having so many weapons once again around him, and, of course, new coaching staff, offensive-minded in many ways coaching staff. I give Mayfield a lot of credit, though. You can't take anything away from him just because, you're set up to succeed does not mean that you get no credit for actually taking those steps and succeeding. So I give him a lot of credit with explosive throws deep down the field. I mean, he's finally using Beckham a little bit more. It seems like Landry's been his favorite target over the years, but over these past couple of years. But he's using Beckham more, allowing the explosive speed on both ends to be used to his advantage. Of course, he has more time to throw, but he's also, when he doesn't have as much time to throw, in those rare instances, he's been checking down much better, whether it be to Chubb out of the backfield or a tight end like Cooper has had some big receptions in the red zone. So I evaluate Mayfield as a much more disciplined and a much smarter quarterback, and that's the reason, one of the many reasons this team is thriving so far.
I'm going to throw a couple PFF stats at you, and I want you to react to them because I believe that I want to see whether you think all right, that's kind of in line with what I'm thinking. So last year Mayfield struggled across the board, whether he was under pressure or he had a clean pocket. This year, when he's been kept clean, he's a little better than league average when he's been kept clean. His passer rating is 109.2, which is actually, I think, 14th or 15th in the league, but it's still, that's a number that's solid. You want that to be better. When he's under pressure, that number drops to 30.9, which is the second worst among 32 quarterbacks. So a key to that is blitzing. When he's not blitzed, his passer rating is 94.2, and when he is blitzed, it's dropped to 76.1. So according to the stats, if he is not blitzed and he's kept clean, he's really good. If you blitz him and you get pressure on him, he struggles more than the average quarterback. Is that kind of what you're thinking right now?
Absolutely. That's used to, and I mean that's the case with a lot of quarterbacks. I think in the NFL, especially quarterbacks like him who like to get out of the pocket and escape. But I think that's right in line with what I would say.
So I know that I'm going to try to go off what Austin has prepared here. So if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of grab what he prepared here. So, the explosive play is, other than turnovers, the most impactful play that you can have in the sport. So the Steelers' defense, while it was elite last year, it still does a lot of things really well, puts pressure on the quarterback. It has stopped the run pretty well, but one thing it has been susceptible to is explosive plays. It's been giving up a lot of explosive plays through the passing game, and only one explosive play in the running game, but that was a touchdown to Miles Sanders last week. How do you feel about the Browns' ability to connect on big plays? I know they have probably the league's most dangerous rushing attack, in my opinion, even without Nick Chubb right now. So how do you feel about the Browns' ability to possibly run the ball? And if they have to throw, how do you feel about their ability to possibly get explosive plays through the passing game?
Really good. I like the passing attack, but it starts by establishing the run, and that's what that's going to be the real litmus test early on is how does this line fare up against that Steelers front seven, and the rushing attack. No matter who the running back is, I don't care who the running back is. Nick Chubb is our best running back, but Kareem Hunt can do the same sorts of things. So it's going to depend on that, and that'll open up the passing game because that's just how football works, and especially how this Browns team is structured. Good defense though in the Steelers, and especially against the run, that scares me.
You have anything further to ask, Austin?
So, what is a matchup that you're watching in this game? Is it going to be Kareem Hunt versus the middle linebackers, or is it going to be one of the wide receivers versus the cornerbacks? Or what's a matchup you're looking for in this game that you think the Browns can exploit?
John, could you
definitely?
I was just going to say, could you do one on both sides? Because I'd like to hear one matchup on both sides of the ball, if you don't mind.
Sure. I got to go in a couple minutes, guys. I'm sorry. But yeah, no, absolutely. One matchup offensively got Kareem Hunt. I love that matchup against against the Steelers, linebackers, and out of the backfield, those running backs making big catches, that's going to be key, and that kind of keeps the defense on their heels, right? And then, John, you were saying on the defensive side of the ball?
Yes, sir.
On the defensive side, well, I hate to say it, but Ogunjobi and Garrett and Richardson up against the Steelers O-line is a matchup that really, I think, plays into our favor. So I'm really looking forward to that matchup. But again, the Steelers offensive line, so deep and so strong. So it really should be interesting to see what happens there.
All right. We won't take up any more of your time, John. Just real quickly, your final thoughts on the game and a final score prediction. That's what we want to hear.
Browns secondary just too depleted right now, so I would say give me the Steelers 27-20 in a tight battle.
Wow. All right. Well, that was John Gehring from 89.1 The Point, our friend and good guest of the show. John, we always appreciate having you on, and we'll be happy to have you on again later this year. So thank you as always, and stay safe and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Sounds good, guys. Don't enjoy it too much, though. Have a good one.
Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Take care, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
All right, bye-bye. All right, we are back talking Browns and Steelers. So, Austin, you thought a little bit about what John had to say about the Browns. We've had some time to digest what was said. So, when you think about the way this game could go with the Browns, when looking at the Steelers' offense, what are you most concerned about? I'd assume that it's going to be that defensive front and Myles Garrett and Larry Ogunjobi.
Yeah, that's where it feels a little bit uneven. Like, I know the Steelers' offensive line has been playing well this year. They definitely haven't allowed that many sacks. They're tied for 7th with only 6 sacks given up. And the running game has been decent, and it's not all really up to them. Our running backs have been doing well. It's been good enough, but I feel like they haven't really been tested, Like, the best test they have was the Texans' defensive front seven, and that's a pretty good front seven. I won't disregard them, but I still don't think it's as good as the Browns right now. What surprised me and what we said in the interview was how well the Browns' inside linebackers are playing for what was expected from them, and with guys coming off injury, and how they're playing above what they should be, or like they're playing better than expected. So I'm worried about the offensive line being able to hold up and create running holes, especially when PFF kind of grades the Steelers as bad at creating holes for the running game.
They're the worst. They're the worst graded team in terms of run blocking. Last place. Yeah.
And then Ogunjobi is one of the best run stuffers in the league this year so far. So it's going to be tough there. I feel a little bit better about as stupid as this sounds, I almost feel better about the pass blocking than the run blocking. I'm kind of scared for both. The run blocking sounds like it's going to be really, really difficult. There might not be a lot of room on the ground. Pass blocking, obviously, I'm very worried about Myles Garrett. But other than Myles Garrett, Sheldon Richardson's pretty good. Olivier Vernon's okay. But I'm not as worried. Myles Garrett, you're going to have to dedicate 2 people to, more than likely, on almost every play. But if the rest of the line can play fine, I think that they're okay in that department. I see a struggle for the run game is what I see.
So yeah, that offensive line versus the Browns' defensive line is what concerns me the most. So I know that they did a good job blocking up the Texans, but J.J. Watt wasn't at full strength in that game. So I'm also curious, do we know if Stefan Wisniewski has been activated yet?
I'm pretty sure he was designated to return, but not activated. We could see him activated game day or Saturday. At the moment, he just got designated to return, so his 21-day window has opened up.
So I guess what I'm wondering here is, do you think they activate him? And if they do, would they start him for DeCastro or Dotson?
I think you got to run with Dotson.
I agree.
You can't. I feel like that would crush confidence, and Dotson's been playing well in the 2 games he had to play in. I mean, he didn't take on easy guys. No, J.J. Watt wasn't at full strength, but he took on I'm sorry.
Fletcher
I'm confusing,
Cox.
I'm
Fletcher
confusing
Cox.
Chuck Okorafor for a start with Kevin Dotson. He took on Fletcher Cox, and then now I can't remember. What other game did Kevin Dotson start?
I think it was the Denver game, wasn't it?
Denver. Yeah, so he went up against like Shelby Harris and stuff like that. And
that's not a nobody.
Well.
That's a pretty good player.
Yeah. So I feel like you can't take it away from the kid. I think that he was drafted and the Steelers knew that he was going to be good. And I mean, might be biased because I loved his tape. I feel like if he can hold his own against Fletcher Cox, he can do it against Shelby Harris. You gotta let him play. I feel like this defensive line is really good, but I feel like Kevin Dotson can really shine against this line.
I'm in agreement with you. I'm not super worried about him, although Ogunjobi does concern me. I'm more concerned about the tackles because Villanueva's been kind of up and down, and although Okorafor has played well, like you said, he hasn't really faced a super stiff test yet, so that makes me nervous.
The tackles are definitely the ones to watch in this game because Olivier Vernon, like I said, is okay, and Sheldon Richardson's okay, but you're really watching Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is a tough matchup, and you're going to be seeing a lot of running back, tight end chips on him to assist whatever side he's on if he moves around.
I expect we're going to see a very similar game plan to what we saw against Philadelphia. A lot of quick throws, and I think a lot more motion. I think we're going to see a lot of attempts to manufacture rushing yards, too, like with Ray McLeod and Chase Claypool.
Yeah, well, hopefully they're not probably now more prepared for the Ray McLeod rushing, but I'm hoping that it still catches them off guard like once or twice in this game.
What I want to see is what the Steelers do off of that. Do they do like throwback screens to the other side? Do they start to do like fakes and maybe a deep throw? Because that is one area where we have mentioned and John mentioned is that the Browns have been struggling with is the back end, the secondary. Do you try to go after them a bit? Ben has been taking care of the football more this year. He hasn't been throwing it deep and connecting deep as often, but maybe this game provides the opportunity to be more aggressive.
Yeah, hopefully if there's a game to get your deep accuracy down, this is going to be it because the Browns have pretty good cornerbacks. I'm a big fan of Denzel Ward. I'm also somewhat of a fan of Tavares Mitchell. I know that he's not much as loved by Browns fans, but I kind of like Tavares Mitchell. But anyhow, safeties, though, is where you really want to attack because they are weak. They are going through a lot of injuries with that, with Carl Joseph being injured for this game, with Ronnie Harrison having a concussion. They lost Grant Delpit, who was supposed to be their starter coming into the year, to a season-ending injury. And now they are left with Andrew Sandeo, and now they're starting Sheldrick Redwine, which, was unideal for them. They're at the bottom of their safety depth. As far as I know, they only have one more safety left on their roster. If they suffer another injury, at the moment, they don't have another safety. I'm sure they'll call up one from the practice squad. I don't actually know who's on their practice squad. I should probably look that up. But at the moment, on the active roster, it's one more safety in Mafada. So they are not deep there. And while Redwine played good in his few snaps last week, Sandeo has been terrible. That was news because I really haven't been watching Browns games, but after doing research for this podcast, I realized, wow, he is giving up a lot of yards through the air. He's playing really, really bad. So if you're going to attack anyone on that defense, you really want to target Sandeo because he is really struggling really bad. If I could get up the statistics, I will. He's just not been playing well for them whatsoever. It's been a struggle when teams have targeted. I have the stats. So 80% of passes thrown his way have been caught, 12 completions on 15 attempts, 201 yards allowed, 3 touchdowns allowed, and he's had 3 missed tackles. He has not been doing good whatsoever. So he's who you want to target. And Isaac Redwine, again, is not a guy you're going to shy away from either because he played good in 19 snaps, and that's it. I don't trust him. He was 5th on the depth chart. He's just been moved up because 3 safety injuries.
Sorry, you were cutting out there for a second. What was the last thing you said?
I just said that, what's it called? I said that Redwine only played 19 defensive snaps, and he was 4th or 5th on the depth chart. Injuries have propelled him up there, so it's not it wouldn't be bad to target him either, just because he did good in a few snaps last week.
Gotcha. Where so your kind of game plan would be a lot of them. I'm assuming would be similar to what mine would be. A lot of motion, trying to manufacture plays, and then you don't want to you want to keep doing what's been working, and you don't want to force the ball, but you want to be maybe a little more aggressive over the top in this one, right?
Yeah. I think that would be an excellent game plan.
All right. On the other side of the ball against the Browns defense, look, what do you think about Baker Mayfield right now? How are you feeling about him?
I feel like he's okay. Not terrible, not great. Maybe average. Average is where I'm feeling. Like, he's thrown 9 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. That's pretty okay for stats. His completion percentage, 61.2%. He's doing okay.
I feel like he could be better when you consider the Browns' rushing attack this year. I just feel like he hasn't been as efficient as he should be. He has one of the lowest quarterback ratings in the NFL in the fourth quarter. He's throwing too many picks for someone that's not throwing it too much. I don't know. I'm still, the jury's still out for him as far as I'm concerned. I still think that he shows signs of him being that number 1 pick that he was 2 years ago. I mean, remember that Thursday night game where the Rudolph Garrett incident was. Mayfield didn't have crazy statistics, but I thought he played really well in that game. Him escaping the pocket was big, and that's something that I think the defense, other than the run game, when they're trying to rush Baker, they need to make sure that he doesn't get out of the pocket.
Yeah, that was the Steelers' defense's bane last time they played. It was really just allowing him to get out of the pocket, not finishing the sacks, allowing him to buy extra time, and the defense can't allow that this week. They can't let him to buy extra time. They need to finish and keep him inside the pocket.
So, I mean, the Browns have weapons on deck. I mean, they have, just talking receivers and tight ends, they have Hooper and Njoku and that third-round tight end. What's his name? Is it Harrison Bryant? Or I forget which Bryant tight end it is.
They got Hunter, I'm pretty sure.
Hunter Bryant?
Pretty sure that, yeah. I think Harrison's the one that just got placed on IR by the, I forget what the team that he was on.
It is Harrison Bryant.
Oof, I was wrong.
So I don't like that there were 2 different Bryants that came out. But in any case, they've got a deep tight end room. All 3 of those guys bring something different to the table. You've got the big names in Jarvis Landry and OBJ. OBJ now playing the best he has since he joined the Browns. So, I mean, there's weapons here. And even though the receivers are limited, given the Steelers' struggles on the back end, that has me a little concerned.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to defend all these guys. It's going to be interesting to see if they're all up, because we don't know what's going on with the OBJ with his illness. And then Jarvis Landry was only able to get a limited participation in practice on Friday. He did not participate the other 2 days of practice. The Steelers might have a somewhat easier job, but regardless, it doesn't take away from the Browns' talent, because you take off one and then you still have really decent guys. And Rashard Higgins is a guy that I really like. He's the wide receiver 3 there. I think he could step up. And if Jarvis Landry or Odell Beckham can't go, I would be worried for the Browns if both can't go, but I have a feeling Odell Beckham's going to play. The illness, I don't think, is that bad. They held him out because there's COVID concerns now. It's like it's better safe to be sorry. So, and I think OBJ is going to play regardless, but Jarvis Landry's a guy I'm looking at that might not be in this game, but regardless. Njoku being back is big for them. It gives them more options with 2 tight end sets, I feel like, because Njoku, I think, is better than Bryant. And then they have Kareem Hunt coming out of the backfield, which is always scary. So they have pass-catching options. It's almost kind of scary that their passing stats aren't that good. And I guess it goes back to Baker Field just not being great this year, just being okay.
So let's talk about the running game, because it's tops in the league in terms of yards per game. They've revamped that offensive line. They've got that play-action boot, zone-style running scheme, which has always been a thorn in the Steelers' side. But the Steelers have also been the best defense in the NFL in terms of rushing defense. They've allowed 1 explosive plays. I think it's like 3 runs in total have had more than 15 yards, and 2 of them were by Melvin Gordon in that Broncos game. The Steelers' run defense has been fantastic, other than that Sanders run.
They've definitely been stout. I mean, they're only behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in rushing yards allowed per game, and again, it's because of that 1 Miles Sanders run. Otherwise, the Steelers would be number 1 ranked in terms of the statistics. So That's just unfortunate, but, I mean, they're bound to give up one long run eventually, but I think that it's a really good matchup. The number one rushing offense against the number one or two rushing defense, that's going to be interesting to watch. I think that the Steelers are going to end up winning here. I think that without Wyatt Taylor, they are a little bit worse team. As now starting Chris Hubbard, there's familiarity on both sides. Wyatt Teller was just playing so well before that, especially in his run blocking. That's a big loss. No Nick Chubb anymore, obviously, for a few more weeks. He's on IR. And Kareem Hunt, I know, is very explosive. He has been in the past when he was with Kansas City, and he's shown some stuff in Cleveland. But I think the Steelers are going to win that matchup. I think that with Wyatt Taylor, it might have been different, but I think that the Steelers' defensive line and front seven should be able to handle it.
So the two things to look out for in this game are how well the Steelers stop the Browns' ground game, and on the other side, the Steelers and offense turning the ball over to the Browns, because the Browns forced a lot of turnovers. The Steelers haven't turned it over as much. I know they had the turnover lately, but I'm mostly talking Ben Roethlisberger. And, when it comes to pressuring Baker Mayfield, we talked about it. We talked about it before that when Baker Mayfield is pressured, he tends to struggle a lot more than when he's not pressured. So getting pressure on the quarterback is obviously a big one. All right, looking at the special teams now, Cody Parkey and Jamie Gillen, the punter and kicker for the Browns. Any thoughts on those guys as far as special teams go?
No. I know that Jamie Gillen kind of hasn't been playing as good as he was, the Scottish Hammer. So that's something interesting to watch. But overall, they're still okay. Their special teams unit, is average.
What happened to Austin Seibert?
Just lost. Fever, I guess.
Let me see. They waived him after the season opener because he missed a field goal and extra point in the loss to the Ravens. He was claimed by the Bengals, so he's on Cincinnati.
Yeah, he's on Cincinnati's practice squad.
You gotta love it, man. A whiff of a 5th-round pick.
Yeah, dude.
That was your man's too.
He was my man's.
And here we are. All right. Yeah. Any final thoughts on the game before we move to the pick'em section?
I think we're good.
All right. Let's get started with Week 6 around the NFL. The 1-4 Texans at the 4-0 Titans. Tennessee's getting 3.5 at home.
I will pick the Titans to cover.
Any thoughts on the game?
I actually don't. I'm sorry. I should have said I just think the Titans are going to cover. I don't really have much thoughts on that game.
I was really hoping the line would be a touchdown here because I feel like this is going to be a close game, but I don't like it, so I will also take the Titans to cover as well. 1-3-1 Bengals at the 3-2 Colts. Indianapolis getting 7.5. Phillip Rivers has got to start playing better, man.
Yeah, the only way that the Bengals really stay in this game is if Phillip Rivers keeps throwing interceptions, which is highly possible. I'm going to pick that he does okay enough that they're able to cover, but really I think it's barely. I think the Colts win by like 9. Regardless, I just think it's going to be tough for Joe Burrow to throw on this defense. They're a really, really good defense. How about you?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I don't trust the Bengals enough right now, and against that defense that the Colts have, that's going to be a hard one for Joe Burrow to try to keep it within 7.5 here. 0-5 Falcons, now without their GM and head coach having been fired. Against the 1-4 Vikings, Minnesota is -4. Minnesota's in trouble here. They need a win. I think the Falcons are dead in the water. And even though firing a coach seems to give teams some life right away, I don't think this will. I like the Vikings easily.
I think the Vikings are going to cover. The Falcons just don't really have a very talented roster. I know that they're getting Julio Jones back, and they're getting not getting Calvin Ridley. They have Calvin Ridley. So that's going to be good for their offense, but it's not really been their offense that's been the biggest problem. I feel like their defense has really been the biggest problem, and that is not going to improve. So I will pick the Vikings to cover as well.
Broncos at Patriots. New England's getting 9 points. Do we Do we know if Cam Newton's going to play?
Cam Newton is going to play, and so is Stephon Gilmore.
All right. So with that in mind, where do you go?
I'm picking the Broncos +9. I have a feeling that with the Patriots, they're going to play down their competition here. With Drew Lock coming back, I'm going to pick Broncos +9.
This game is in New England, so I like the Patriots to cover. Moving on to Washington, the football team at the New York Giants. The G-Men are favored at home. It's going to be Kyle Allen back at quarterback for the Washington football team. I'm going to take the football team plus the points. I think they're still the better team. And I don't know. I don't love Kyle Allen, but I don't know why. I still don't know what they're doing at quarterback. I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. I will also pick the football team +3. Just don't like the Giants roster at the moment. The Giants could be the second worst team in this league, only behind the Jets. Both the New Jersey teams are just bad.
Baltimore at Philadelphia. Baltimore is getting 9.5 on the road. I think the Ravens are going to do what the Eagles or what the Steelers didn't do to the Eagles last week and win big. So I like the Ravens easily.
I will also pick the Ravens to cover. They're just a way better team on paper.
The Bears and Panthers, two teams that were seemingly unimpressive to start the year. Now a game between two teams with winning records. Carolina's getting 1.5. Teddy Bridgewater's coming off his best game with the Panthers so far. The Bears are a very quiet 4-1.
I like the Panthers. The Panthers have been playing great. Teddy Bridgewater's been playing great. Robbie Anderson also playing great. I like the Panthers to win here. How about you?
I like the Bears plus the 1.5 here. They had a little extra time to prep, and I think that they are slightly more talented, even though the Panthers have been playing well this year. The Lions at the Jaguars, 1-3 v 1-4. Detroit's getting a 3-point line here on the road. They're favored by 3 here. Jacksonville has been skidding, but the Lions are not a good team either. This is one I'd stay away from, but I'll take the Lions to cover here.
I'm going to pick the Jaguars +3. I just can't trust the Lions at all this year.
We got a matchup between two AFC East teams, the 0-5 Jets at the 2-3 Dolphins. Miami getting 9.5. I already know. I already know where you're going.
I'm picking every team to cover against the Jets. It does not matter. Dolphins cover.
What is the Jets' record against the spread this year? Is it 0-5?
I'm fairly confident that they haven't got within the spread once.
Joe Flacco's starting again, right? All right. Yeah, with that in mind, I will also take the Dolphins to lay the points here and win big. I just can't trust the Jets right now. I don't think anyone can. Packers at the Buccaneers, a matchup between Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Green Bay's got the 1-point advantage here as we roll into this one. I like the Packers to win this one, personally.
I felt like this was a little bit disrespectful. I thought that this line was a little bit too small. I'm picking the Packers to cover, but I would have picked the Packers to cover at like 4 or 5.
Well,
Buccaneers have not been playing well. Buccaneers barely stuck past the Chargers. Buccaneers were playing down last week. Barely edged it out. Like, they got beat up by the Saints, who aren't playing very well. I am not high on the Buccaneers right now. So I'm picking the Packers to cover. I thought this line was a little bit disrespectful.
Not to mention Devontae Adams is back, right?
Yeah, Davante Adams is playing in this game.
So, yeah, I like the Packers to win relatively comfortably by about a touchdown here. Sunday Night Football, we have the Rams and the 49ers. The Rams are 4-1, but with an inflated record because they played the NFC East. All 4 teams already. The Niners, 2-3, but I think the Niners are in trouble here. They've got to figure out issues on offense quickly. I like the Rams -3.
For me, I'm going to pick the Rams to cover as well. I just don't think the 49ers are that good of a team at the moment. Like, their quarterback play isn't good enough, and their defense isn't good enough to make up for the quarterback play this year. Like, last year, a big reason why the 49ers were able to make it so far and make it to the Super Bowl was because of their defense. I still swore that their quarterback play wasn't that good because Jimmy G just, at best, is, like, okay. Like, I've never been a big Jimmy G fan. That being said, I think the Rams cover. I think that we're seeing that the problem with the 49ers, they have no offense. So Rams cover.
Yeah, he might not be that good, and when he's injured on top of it, then the offense is really sputtering, even with the great mind of Kyle Shanahan himself. So I think that's the right choice there. Monday night we have two games. We have the 4-1 Chiefs at the 4-1 Bills. Kansas City is getting 5 points on the road. Both teams looking unimpressive in recent weeks here, especially the Chiefs. But the Bills lost their last game as well. So both teams coming in with a loss. They're both going to be pissed off. I guess I'll take Kansas City to cover here. I really don't like this game for either team. Both teams have been kind of disappointing so far by their standards.
Yeah, this one is a tough one. The Chiefs are coming in well rested, but it might have been too much rest. Like, having too much time off, I think, is a bad thing. But Andy Reid with time off has always been traditionally really good. So I kind of went back and forth because the Bills looked really bad last week. The Chiefs, their defense looked really bad. Their offense looked the same. I'm going to pick Kansas City to cover because the Bills' defense just hasn't been playing all too well, in my opinion.
3-2 Cardinals at the 2-3 division-leading Cowboys. Arizona's getting 1.5 on the road. I don't know where I want to stand on this one. You want to go first?
Yeah, give me the Andy Dalton show to come in, play a big game and a big role, and beat the Cardinals and cover the 1.5 point spread. I obviously love Kyler Murray still, even though he's kind of come back to earth. But I think that Andy Dalton is going to I think you said on the podcast last week, he is one of the best backup quarterbacks you could have. I don't really see how the Cardinals are going to keep up. I still think that Dalton is a serviceable quarterback, so I think that the Cowboys cover.
I'm sorry,
Cowboys plus 1.5.
I still think you could start for a lot of teams, honestly.
That's true.
I'll take the Cardinals just to be contrarian here, although I'm not overly convinced either way. I'm kind of curious because I've been kind of back and forth on the Cardinals this year, but I'll take them this time. I think the Cowboys, NFC East, just not that good. So let's move on to X Factors and bold predictions. You want to go first with offense or defense?
Yeah, sure, I'll go. So for offense, I'm picking James Washington. I've been picking the offensive line, I think, all year. I don't think I've picked anyone else, so I'm going to choose him because I think it's his turn to have a big game. With Deontay Johnson out and Claypool, I think, well accounted for now. I don't think the Browns are going to make the same mistake that the Eagles did. I think that James Washington is due for his big game of the year. I know he got the touchdown against the Giants. That was a big boy touchdown, but I think that he's going to have a solid game here. And then on defense, at first.
What was that?
Want to pick your offensive guy first? All
right, sure. I'm going to go with Alejandro.
I'm going
to go with Villanueva at tackle. I believe he's going to be matched up on Myles Garrett more often, so I'm going to go with him because Garrett's playing as well as he ever has, and the Steelers' offensive line is not weak, but not at the heights it once was at. So the Steelers are going to need a big game out of him to protect Ben Roethlisberger and ultimately not turn the football over, which the Browns have been great at forcing turnovers this year. So I got Villanueva as my offensive X factor.
So for defense, settling on Minkah Fitzpatrick, it's been a quiet year for him, and when it's not quiet, it hasn't been really good. I think that he's going to step up big in this game and have his first good game of the season here. And so I'm picking Minkah Fitzpatrick. Who do you got?
I'm going to go with Steven Nelson for similar reasons. He did have 2 interceptions last week, but we know that wasn't necessarily indicative of his play this season. He has to be better, and he's going to be matched up against most likely Odell Beckham Jr., I would guess. Him and Joe Hayden, I don't know exactly who's going to be getting that, but I'm more focused on Nelson in this one. So I'd like to see him play a classic Steven Nelson 2019 game where he was a shutdown corner. So I'd like to see a little bit of that. So I'll give you my first bold prediction, and I don't know if you were going to do this too. It might not even be that bold, but I think that we should both pick James Washington to lead the team in receiving because it's been a different player every week, and I feel like it's James Washington's turn, especially with Deontay Johnson out. So can that be a combined one?
Yeah, sure. We'll have that as a combined one.
Okay. You want to go ahead now?
Sure. So my first bold prediction is Minka Fitzpatrick has 2 turnovers and a tackle for a loss. Then for James Washington to add on, I think he's going to have 150 receiving yards. Let's make it weird. Over 153. And those are my 2 bold predictions. I'm not going to do a third one this week.
I'm going to have Alejandro Villanueva catching a touchdown pass just because I don't want to say he's not going to give up a sack because I feel like that's going to happen. And he's caught a touchdown pass before. So I'll do that. And then on the other side, how about Steven Nelson has 2 picks again? Let's give him 4 interceptions in 2 games. Does that sound bold enough to you?
It sounds pretty bold. I would think so.
Alrighty. So all in all, 4-1 Browns at the 4-0 Steelers. Pittsburgh's getting 3.5 points at home. Where do you lean on this? The first big matchup between these 2 teams in a long time.
So the Browns' offense has been really good, but the big thing I think is turnovers. A reason why they've been able to put up so many points, because they're averaging over 34 points a game, is because they lead the league in turnovers. When you have 6 interceptions and 6 fumbles, it's easy to get points off of turnovers in short yardage situations. The Steelers have been really good about not turning over the ball this year. That being said, I think that the Steelers are able to sneak out a win 24-23. A very close game, and that's Cleveland plus the points. Pittsburgh's favored by 3.5.
Wow. I actually had a score in mind that was also a 1-point game, but not quite that. So I think ultimately when it comes to picking a winner, the way I see it is the Browns have won 1 time in the last 19 years in Heinz Field's history. And it was in the 3rd year of its existence. Ben Roethlisberger does not lose to the Browns. He just doesn't. And when he does, it's not in Pittsburgh. So when you take that into account, I know history doesn't really matter, but it kind of does. Typically that says a lot. But for this particular matchup, I still think that the Steelers have a slightly better team. I think playing at home will help them. And even though the Browns have that really good defensive line, I think the Steelers are going to be able to move the football. And the key is obviously Ben Roethlisberger and the turnovers. And on the other side, the Steelers stopping the run. If the Steelers can slow down the running game, I like the Steelers' chances against Baker Mayfield in this one. I think it's going to be a hotly contested, very close game. But I think ultimately Ben Roethlisberger will engineer a game-winning drive in the final minute, leading the Steelers to a 27-26 victory with Chris Boswell hitting the game-winning field goal as time expires, pushing the Steelers to 5-0. I don't know when the last time that happened. Maybe 1978, 79. We'll have to take a look at some point here.
It was 79. That's the only other time that they've been 5-0.
Well, how about that? So
they've never been 5-0 any other time.
Isn't that something pretty crazy? So we'll see on Sunday. But in the meantime, any final thoughts on this game and this week, Austin? I mean, I know we have to talk about a couple final things here.
No, I'm good with this game.
Alrighty. So as far as NFL news goes, the big thing was that former Steelers running back Le'Veon Bell was released by the New York Jets and has since been picked up by the Kansas City Chiefs. What do you think about that?
I think it's a good move. The Chiefs has had some struggles on the goal line with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And a big thing that I didn't realize, I said it without knowing, but I've seen the stats since then, is I thought that regardless of how Le'Veon Bell's been playing, he is still one of the best pass-blocking running backs in the league. I know you don't really pay a running back just to pass block, but I was afraid I watched the Chiefs' first game, right? And I saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire come off on like almost every third down despite being excellent. He's only had 8 pass-blocking snaps on the year. He is not doing well in the pass-blocking department, and that's a reason why I thought that they would be getting Bell, and I think that it's a good choice because they want Bell for short yardage and pass-blocking, and I think that he adds a weapon in the receiving game because in my mind, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a really good receiving back, so they didn't really improve in that regard, but now they have like a more complete back that can pass block and receive and is better in short yardage situation. I still don't think he's a very good rusher like he was when he was in Pittsburgh, but I think it improves them. I think it was a good move for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that was a solid move for them. What about a kind of a career retrospective on Bell now? Because He sat out that year. He got $28 million from the Jets, but if he had accepted that offer from the Steelers, he'd be in year 3 of a $70 million contract, which would have paid out $45 million in the first 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, he should have fired his Adisa Bakari a while ago, but I mean, he's still rolling with him. But he's made mistakes. Maybe he could salvage his career in Kansas City. He chose a place where he has a good chance to win a ring, so you just good luck to him.
Yeah, I not only do I think that he sabotaged himself of a lot of money, but I really think he might have had a chance at the Hall of Fame with the way he was playing if he didn't sit out in 18 and leave for the Jets.
Scrimmage yards per game were ridiculous. He was on track.
So who do you blame his lack of production on more? Do you blame Adam Gase or Bell himself?
I blame Bell himself. Because there was something I predicted when he left. It's like he needs because even behind the Steelers' offensive line, he really wasn't averaging a high yards per carry, and just going behind a way worse offensive line just made it worse. So I mean, I guess that means it's both to blame, but like it's really against Bell for going behind a worse offensive line.
And make no mistake about it, the last couple years of his career in Pittsburgh, he was no longer the really explosive runner that he was his first few years. He was never a big explosive runner, but the 20-yard running plays were very few and far between. He's a lot more of a 6, 7, 8-yard runner, a guy that nickel and dimes you to death, but he wasn't a big explosive yard runner. And I think that when you don't have a great offensive line, that's going to get compounded because he has the best ball carrier vision in the league, but over time, injuries and age have slowed him down a little bit. So again, you're kind of limiting as far as how much he can really add in terms of explosive runs, which is not the worst thing in the world. You don't need to have explosive runs all the time, but you can't be the most complete back in the league when you're not doing that anymore.
I couldn't agree more.
So I think that if he stayed in Pittsburgh, he'd be on track for the Hall of Fame, honestly.
Probably right.
I mean, if he had played in one more game with the Steelers, he'd probably be the third leading rusher in team history behind Bettis and Harris. And that was at the time. He's the fourth all-time leading rusher in team history. But I think it was a good thing that he left because James Conner had a really good year in 2018. I know the running back struggled last year, but I don't know if Bell changes much about that. We know how interchangeable they are now.
Yeah, easy peasy lemon squeeze. You just pick up a 6th-rounder and just plug them in.
What were you thinking when the whole Bell thing was going on? Because I was still unsure at the time about the value of running backs, but I think now we have a clear answer, but I don't think we did then.
I, at the time, wanted them to pay him $10 million before I knew his asking price was $12 million, and I was like, no chance. But I originally wanted them to make him the highest paid running back, and now, since then, disagree with that opinion entirely. The highest paid back before him at the time when that first started happening was Sean McCoy and Devontae Freeman at like $8.5 million. So I was like, yeah, make him $10 million running back. That sounds good. And he wanted 12. I was like, no chance. And then started the descent of not wanting to pay a running back ever. Here we are.
And then he wanted, then the franchise tag in what was it going to be? I think 2018 was supposed to be $14 million, and that's when he held out.
And that's wild, man. That is so wild.
Sure is. So, kind of funny. Everyone was ripping Ben Roethlisberger on their way out of town, but less than 2 years after that, Bell and Brown don't have a job, and Martavis Bryant, who didn't rip Ben, but was one of the quote unquote killer bees on the side there. None of those guys are playing in the league. I mean, I know Bell just got a job, but you know what I meant. They no longer have a job with the team they originally signed or were traded to.
Yeah, man.
So, pretty wild. Well, we sit here ready for Week 6 of the NFL season. Any closing thoughts, or are we good to go?
Good to go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, as always, for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Feel free to visit our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com, and check out our email, strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Email us if you have any questions. You can find our episodes posted on YouTube and SoundCloud, and we're on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Feel free to give us a follow. We appreciate it. And we hope everybody enjoys the games on Sunday and Monday, of course, too. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Also, if you appreciated and enjoyed the interview with John, feel free to give him a follow. I'm going to look up his Twitter real quickly. Always appreciate having guests on our show. We can't do it all the time because we don't have a ton of people that we know that are big into other teams, but John is one of those guys, and we always appreciate having him on. So if you like what he did, feel free to give him a follow at JGOEHRING JGaring8. So that's at JGaring8. Feel free to give him a follow if you want. I'm sure he'll be tweeting a bit about. I'm sure he'll be talking a bit about the Steelers game. We've seen his last tweet. He retweeted enough about the political posts. Can we just get back to hating the Steelers? So I think John's ready for the game.
I hope so.
So, all right. Well, until next time, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast, and have a great night and enjoy the game.
Good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.